So what is popular culture? What images, ideas, or practices come to mind? When you think about popular culture, you might be thinking about music, food, dance, fashion, maybe artwork, television, or perhaps celebrities and athletes. But what about chisme, meaning gossip?
Te das cuenta que el chisme está bueno cuando.
What about the popular jokes that you hear over and over again?
¿Qué hace Shakira cuando reciba un mensaje?
Lole, lole, lole.
What about ghost stories? Today we have new forms of popular culture thanks to the internet in the form of memes and online communities like Stan Twitter. In this video, we will be covering what is popular culture, more specifically, what is Latin American popular culture, and at that, what facets make Latin American popular culture popular? To help us answer these questions, we will refer to the work of historians William H. Beezley and Linda A. Curcio-Nagy. We will also look at one of the works of Silvia Bermúdez, professor of literature and Iberian studies. For those on YouTube, I have included the citations for these works here and in the video description as well. Now, let's get to it. We can name examples of popular culture such as food, music, dance, but coming up with a solid definition of popular culture is not so straightforward. When it comes to Latin American popular culture, you might think of popular forms of media, most notably television series in the form of novelas, for example. Some sports are very popular in Latin America, most notably soccer, boxing, and more recently, baseball has gained popularity in Mexico. There are also dances and music such as the tango, salsa, merengue, and boleros, which are explored in Bermúdez's article. Beezley and Curcio-Nagy note that popular culture can refer to, quote, the set of images, practices, and interactions that distinguishes a community and often serves as a synonym for national identity. Today, for example, Mexican national identity is often defined by its popular culture. The Mexican state notoriously supported nationalist projects in post-revolutionary Mexico. Known as the Mexicanidad movement, the Mexican state promoted mariachi music and later the artworks of renowned artists such as Diego Rivera, who produced massive murals commemorating the Mexican working people and their indigenous heritage. During this moment, we saw the popularization of traditional dresses such as the huipil and dances like ballet folclórico, which were inspired by Mexican folkloric dance traditions. Popular culture can also refer to a set of behavioral practices with their own pervasive ordinary character, roots, and unwritten expressions. In Bermúdez's work, she demonstrates how the tango and merengue have unique characteristics and histories that distinguished them in the 1880s. There were communities of people who danced these dances and passed them on non-verbally. Tango was born in the outskirts of Buenos Aires, Argentina, as an urban dance. It has been linked to African roots, as well as Spanish and Italian influences. Tango was a dance of the social underclasses who popularized it in bars, cafes, and brothels, dance salons, and events known as milongas. Unlike the tango, which originated in the cities, merengue was born in the rural countryside of the Dominican Republic. It started off as a folk dance and was later adopted as a ballroom dance in the 1920s. It was initially known as Perico-Ripiao, a dance of the Dominican peasants. The name came from a brothel called El Perico-Ripiao in the city of Santiago de los Caballeros, where it was danced. Dance, it's something that humans find enjoyable. It reinforces the notion that popular culture brings pleasure. For that matter, Beezley and Curcio-Nagy also define popular culture as the various forms of pleasure in everyday life. It is what makes life memorable. However, sometimes popular culture can be transmitted with a purpose. It is used to reorganize the past and, quote, promotes the intriguing aspects of national culture. Take, for example, the dictatorship of Rafael Trujillo, the dictator of the Dominican Republic. He integrated merengue into his television and radio electoral campaigns in the 1930s. He not only appropriated merengue to bolster his popularity, Trujillo sought to promote merengue as this symbol of national expression for the Dominican Republic. However, this does not mean that popular culture is always intended to reflect the interests of the state or of the status quo. One of the most notable characteristics of popular culture is that it is often transgressive because it has a, quote, raw edge bordering on or crossing into vulgarity, with sexual innuendo, rich profanity, and ethnic slurs. Many popular dance forms in Latin America were viewed as overtly sexual because some felt that their movements were reminiscent of carnal acts. Perreo, which is associated with reggaeton, is perhaps one of the most recent examples of such controversies. The tango itself was viewed as risque because it was associated with sex work. After all, the tango was diffused in brothels, which were then referred to as dance academies or academias de baile. Imagine telling your parents that you were just going off to dance in the dance academy. Nice move, Argentina. Sometimes popular culture, in this case music and dance, can be viewed as oppositional. Rock en Español became the music of protest, especially in Argentina, Chile, and Mexico. From 1976 to 1983, Argentina experienced the birth of Rock Nacional, which challenged the ideology of the right-wing military dictatorship. Artists included Charly Garcia and Fito Páez. During the democratic era, artists continued to champion free expression, as exemplified by Soda Stereo and Los Fabulosos Cadillacs. Mexico's Maldita Vecindad gained popularity in songs that criticized the corruption in the Mexican government, while also highlighting the plight of Mexican immigrants who risked their lives migrating to the United States and were discriminated against as, quote, mojados or wetbacks. Rock en Español also became a space where Latin Americans challenged patriarchy in the music industry. Andrea Echeverri from Colombia sang with Aterciopelados in the 1990s and contributed to the production of some of the band's most memorable albums. Popular Mexican rockeras included Alejandra Guzman and Eli Guerra. Even Shakira, once upon a time, was known as a rockera, although thanks to the mass media and globalization, her music now more widely is considered within the spectrum of pop music. This takes us to our next point. What factors make Latin American popular culture popular? We might think that popular culture only began thanks to the rise of globalization and the mass media industries that gave rise to television and radio. After all, it is thanks to the mass media and the Latin American music industry that merengue was later carried on by Caribbean artists such as Johnny Ventura, Juan Luis Guerra, and Celia Cruz herself. Azúcar! Azúcar! Merengue was also popularized by artists outside of the Caribbean. This sort of reminds me of reggaeton. Although it was born in the Caribbean, we now see that there are reggaeton artists that are born and based in Mexico and in South America. It is also thanks to the global market that Latin American music has gained popularity in the United States and in other parts of the world. This cultural reciprocity also worked in the other direction. Take the song You're Still the One by Shania Twain that was written in 1997. It was covered in Spanish by Rogelio Martinez in 1999 as Y Sigue Siendo Tú.
Did you know that this song most recently covered by Grupo Arriesgado and Grupo Marca Registrada? Y sigue siendo tú, mi amor eterno and famously covered by Rogelio Martinez in the late 90s. Y sigue siendo tú, mi amor eterno is actually a Spanish cover version of the song You're Still the One by Shania Twain. You're still the one I run to, the one that I be.
Both of the songs became hits.
You even have some folks arguing that one was better than the other, or some folks arguing that the Spanish version was better than the other, but that's a conversation for another time.
Mass media can definitely help to disseminate popular culture, But we have to remember that popular culture can be traced back to the dawn of ancient human civilizations. It's not restricted to just the 20th and 21st centuries. The ancient Incas had their own popular forms of dress, artwork, and even religious customs. The Aztecs or the Mexicas also had their own forms of popular theater that survived into the early colonial period, and their forms of theater seem to contain elements of humor. As Beezley and Curcio-Nagy point out, after the Spanish conquest, indigenous peoples continued to practice their own forms of comedy by parodying Catholic religious rituals. Priests had deduced that the indigenous peoples had childlike learning abilities because they often made mistakes when carrying out Catholic religious performances. The reality was that the indigenous people were most likely making these mistakes on purpose as a form of satire. Now listen, I used to be an altar boy, and we often joked around when we had to help with the reenactments of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus on Easter and such. And yes, the señoras in the Catholic Church did scold us when we were doing so, but that's a conversation for another time. Another example, during the celebration of Corpus Christi in 17th century Mexico, people used the occasion to perform parodies of colonial bureaucrats in the form of puppet shows, poems, and even masked performances. Into the 20th century, Mexican theater famously poked fun at people who moved to the cities from the rural countryside, depicting them as what we would call here in the States country bumpkins, unaccustomed to city life. They were embodied in an archetype known as the pelado, popularized by the figure of Cantinflas, who became a movie sensation. Perhaps more recent famous depictions of the pelado, or the pelada I should say, include figures like Maria la del Barrio and La India Maria. But yes, there is anti-indigenous and racist undertones in her depiction as well. That's another can of worms, I understand. That is a subject for another time. In the 1990s, Mexicans continued to intertwine humor with popular culture for political purposes. The corrupt Mexican president Carlos Salinas de Gortari, for example, was parodied as the Chupacabras monsters in the 1990s in t-shirts, in political cartoons, and also in artworks. He literally experienced the horrors of being depicted as a blood-sucking politician. Another facet of Latin American popular culture that warrants highlighting are African roots, particularly in the areas of popular music and religion. Much Latin American music has its roots in African rhythms and dances. Salsa is derived from the Cuban son and is closely associated with Santeria. African religious traditions brought to Latin America, such as Brazilian candomblé and Caribbean Santeria, both recognize the significance of the body as a vehicle to manifest divine entities. Candomblé, for example, incorporates the rituals of possession in which the orishas, African divinities, come to embody the believer. Such movements, the methods of worship, and also dance have historically been looked down upon. These African religious customs have been denounced as unchristian, for the lack of a better term, and were often viewed as diabolical. For African societies in Latin America, these were a way to form community and solidarity. The perseverance of these customs is a testament to the survival of African religious traditions brought to Latin America by enslaved Africans. These traditions have persevered despite the persecution of Spanish colonizers and the Catholic Church, who have sought to weed out anything that could be viewed as heretical. We can conclude that dances like the tango, merengue, and salsa were not just forms of entertainment. They were, in part, the end products of African religious resistance, which again stands as a testament to how popular culture can also serve as a form of opposition. Popular culture, then, can be used as a tool for the underprivileged masses. It is also a form of survival in a capitalistic or repressive society that otherwise undervalues them. That is all for now, and I will see you in the next lecture.